Right. Well, there are a whole host of reasons why one would describe Nigeria as gateway. But let me probably just zero in on probably two, not more than three of these, at least from my own perspective. As an economist, I have always argued that opportunity is to be found in a whole series of dimensions, depending on how well you know how to look at it. So, if we're going to start, a lot has been said about Nigeria's population, around Nigeria's land mass for agriculture, around Nigeria's potential as far as the Africa Continental Trade Agreement is concerned. Yes, all of that's there. But in my view, perhaps the biggest set of circumstances that make for me Nigeria gateway is that we appear to be heading in the direction of exciting reforms. Because in my view, the kind of change that these reforms successfully implemented, some of them the Honorable Minister has alluded to, successfully implemented, change the dynamics of the Nigerian economy in ways that I suspect not even those of us who are on this call are probably able to anticipate at this point. If you go back, the last set of, shall we say, thoroughgoing reforms was late 80s. And we all saw the kind of growth in the Nigerian economy that happened at that time. But one of the important dimensions of reform that I am seeing today, at least given where I sit, is a determination for reform and the growth that hopefully follows reform to be inclusive. I think it was October last year when His Excellency the President alluded to or announced the intention of government to lift out 100 million people from poverty over a period of a decade. Now, it doesn't matter whether you say to me, oh, but he's not going to be there in a decade. Certainly, we don't expect him to be there. But it'd be useful to see the kinds of foundations that are laid over the next 2.5 years that would drive and sustain that kind of reform. We've, over the past couple of years, made a lot of noise around the kind of ease of doing business. Now we're seeing progress on that. But for me, that's interesting, but that's not even the key. It's not even the half of it as far as I'm concerned. We may say it's slow, but in the last 2 weeks or thereabout, we have seen the central bank merge the currency rates. So you now have a unified currency. Now, there are still issues around, oh, is it now market reflective? But what is clear is that there is an appetite for reform. There has been, in the last couple of weeks, an interesting discussion. I'm not going to say debate, but an interesting discussion around energy pricing. We all saw, the removal of subsidies. Indeed, I was one of those who was a bit worried that it was good when oil prices were down to be able to announce a reduction in fuel prices. What would happen when oil prices started to recover? But what we have seen is the government's resolve to say it does not want to continue spending money in sustaining a regime of subsidies. And we have actually now seen announcements of fuel prices increasing. Now, it's for me, these are some interesting dimensions. But a further thing to also put on the table, for consideration, the minister has mentioned the Continental Trade Agreement. So there's no point in talking about that. But it's also important to bear in mind that Nigeria is now in the process of producing a successor document to the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, the ERGP. As I'm sure you all know, the ERGP expires this year. And indeed, my understanding of the ongoing work is that the budget for 2021 will draw some of its inspiration from ongoing work in the ERGP. Now, there's a bridge between the ERGP1, which is what is currently running, and the successor to the ERGP. And that is the Economic Sustainability Plan that has now been approved by the Federal Executive Council, and which is now in the stage of implementation. And one of the interesting things about that plan is the intention that whatever is not, because it's supposed to cover 12 months, whatever is not achieved in that time frame gets rolled into the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. And something else that I found, quite interesting, talking to those who are managing the process of creating the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan 2, if I can call it that. I'm not saying that that is what it will be called when it's finished, but as, shall we say, as a discussion title for this morning, I will call it ERGP2, is that ERGP2 is actually, and this is the first time I have heard this in the Nigerian development planning arena, where they are pulling together all various plans that the various ministries, departments, and agencies have, all various approved policies, so as to ensure a holistic, internally consistent plan, so that you don't, get what sometimes seems to happen, where you've got a plan and then all of a sudden you have an approved policy in a ministry that is very different from the provisions of the plan, where you have inputs into the plan that look very different and are not compatible with policy. So you've got a framework being built, and that framework is pulling together a whole host of stuff that I'm not going to say is unusual, but certainly it's been highlighted for everybody to reflect upon. The other thing that I would like to draw attention to in terms of saying Nigeria as a gateway, one of our biggest problems has been infrastructure, because if you're going to be a gateway, the very least you must be able to do is to be able to connect things. If you're unable to connect things, then sorry, a gateway you may attempt to be, but you are unlikely to be. And for me, seeing the development of Nigeria's rail infrastructure in particular is something that I think is worth paying attention to, because well, not all of a sudden, but certainly over the past 5 years, 7, 8 years, we're beginning to see the emergence of a rail network that potentially begins to provide logistic solutions, but also reduces costs as far as logistics are concerned for businesses operating out of Nigeria, and making them very, very cost competitive. So for me, I can see quite a number of things happening. Yes, a lot's been said about ease of doing business. My hope always is that Nigeria moves into the top 50 as far as ease of doing business is concerned, because that is the point at which you know that you're actually at the game, that you really are well seated and competitive at the game. I'm waiting to see, the Honorable Minister mentioned the NEPC, the Export Promotion Council. And in those moments when I drift up to sleep and dream about what may be possible, I say to myself, imagine for a moment that Nigeria was producing high quality cotton, and that Nigeria's cotton was producing high quality fabrics, and that just for the moment, just for a minute, just think about it. If all of a sudden Nigeria finds itself in the beddings, just take a very basic output of cotton, like beddings. I'm told that's about a $60 billion industry annually. And I keep saying to myself, I see no reason why Nigeria isn't picking up 5, 6 billion. And don't also forget, if you're talking about inclusive growth, you're going to have to cater to the poorly educated, but who you can skill in these kinds of industries. So these are the kinds of things that speak to me and make me hopeful that, well, not just hopeful, but actually the belief that we really can make a fist of it. There are so many, there are other things that we could talk about, but I'm sure other contributors will amplify on some of what I have said. Thank you.
Needless to say, I mean, I believe very strongly in Nigeria's prospect as an investment destination. I find quite often when people talk about Nigeria, they speak in the context of the challenges, they speak in the context of now. I'm not aware of any investor that invests because of now. Investors invest because of the prospects that they see in the future, because that is where the benefits of their investments will generally come. And a lot of the reasons why Nigeria remains an attractive investment destination has been mentioned. But when I think in particular about demographic dividend, clearly because of the age and distribution of Nigeria's youth, the expectation is that as time progresses, we will move further and further into what I will call a demographic sweet spot, as the working age of the population, decreases because of the because of the way our demographics work. But when you look at why investors invest and why in particular they invest in Africa, they first invest because of natural resources, because of economic growth prospects, because of the size of the domestic markets, because of the large low-cost labor force that's available. They look at demographics, which I've referred to, and then the political and social environment. And on all of the factors that investors look to, Nigeria, actually comes across very, very favorably. It's only in recent times that our economic growth numbers have been low. But that also underscores the reason, why we need investment across a broad range of categories. And we consider that there are a number of attractive incentives that to help investors even cross that bridge even further. At NIPC, we published a compendium of investment incentives, which is available on our website. It's a compilation of all the fiscal incentives in Nigerian tax laws and all the incentives that have been duly approved by government. In particular, this focuses on incentives at federal level. But we're working on an update on this document that will carry incentives that exist even at state level. And one or two incentives from that document that investors may not be aware of. One relates to research and development. We actually have incentives in Nigeria for companies that invest in research and development that allows them to recover some of the costs that they spend on research and development, especially when it goes into commercial manufacturing. Many are aware of the Pioneer Status Incentive, which allows companies that are operating in relevant industries, that are operating in relevant economic activities, to benefit from a 3 to 5 year company income tax relief. Essentially, in that period where a company enters a new line of business, where they need the greatest support in allowing them to settle down.
There's an awful lot in there, right? And I think I should just pay tribute to the Honourable Minister, who I think is doing an excellent job in really helping to promote the business environment in Nigeria, to work between Nigeria and the UK for our shared endeavour to increase the trade and investment that we have between our countries. And I think what we have seen is a wonderful partnership, and I think that partnership really sits at the heart of what we are trying to do here, and sees the Minister engaging with UK investors and understanding the opportunities, understanding the challenges, and working really hard to mobilise the system to effect the changes that companies need to be able to do good business. I mean, I think just sort of reflecting on the Minister's comments and indeed the NBCC President's comments about the scale of trade and investment between Nigeria and the UK. We're talking billions of pounds. Our latest figures show something in the region of £4.4 billion of trade between us, £4.2 billion of investment from the UK into Nigeria, and we've got absolute UK titans invested in Nigeria over the long term, like Prudential, Unilever, GSK, and so on. And I think that speaks to the long-term partnership that we've got and the commitment that we have. And I think it speaks to the dynamism of the Nigerian economy. So I think things are good. But actually, when you step back and look at some of the detail that sits behind it, there is so much more that we could do. And I think this word potential really comes out very strongly of, sort of untapped potential that exists today. This is not something that you have to wait for years to be able to find opportunities to do more trade and investment. These opportunities are very real today, and we can come on to talk about sort of where we see those opportunities. But I think that both sides, UK and Nigeria, are very committed to seeing us increase the value of trade and investment in both directions, so that we, our economies, our people benefit, we create and we sustain even more jobs. So I think there's a really exciting market. We're in a good place now, but we can be in a much better place through really concerted effort on both sides. And I think I would just sort of bring it back to where you started, Chantele, where you said, Nigeria isn't the only country in Africa presenting itself as the gateway to Africa. And much in the same way as investment is a highly competitive business, so is being the gateway to Africa. And I think all those answers that we've heard about what makes Nigeria such an exciting market today, in terms of just the sheer scale and the energy and the dynamism that you see everywhere across the country, and then the ambitions and the aspirations of the government and what they're doing to bring in the reforms to keep propelling Nigeria's economy forward, and make it continue to be competitive against other pretenders to the crown of gateway to Africa. So I think that there's I just wanted to add that into the mix. I think in terms of we've often seen the big companies coming into Nigeria. So I mentioned earlier, some of our long-term investors. Standard Chartered is an obvious one, but Unilever, GSK, Prudential, and so on. So it's clearly a market where big companies can do well over a prolonged period of time. We've seen those investors in there for decades in some cases. But what we're increasingly seeing as well is the importance of agility and adaptability, inclusivity in our supply chains, and sustainability around all of that. And that really points to SMEs and how we support entrepreneurs, how we engage in technology as an enabler and a response to the world around us, but how we bring supply chains together in different ways. And certainly as so I chair an investors group which brings UK investors in Africa together to talk between the public and the private sector about how we can help to drive more investment flows into Africa from the UK, including from the 99.9% of the UK's economy that happens to be SMEs. And I think there is a really important partnership and relationship that we can stoke around where we've got big corporates and working with them on how they are diversifying supply chains, bringing in different companies, more diverse, more inclusive, more sustainable operating companies, to mix things up and to make things, to keep things moving, to keep responding to what customers are looking for in terms of accountability and transparency and openness of supply chains. And to really make sure that we are supporting one another in having diverse economies, and we are supporting entrepreneurs, whether they are of whatever background, whatever sort of extraction. So I think that there's a really important role here. It's not just the UK economy that has an enormous number of SMEs. So it's beholden on all of us actually to find the right ways to bring investment into those smaller companies, to support them, to provide the environment that enables them to flourish. Because not only because that's really important for supply chains, and particularly in a kind of response to, I suppose, response to COVID-19, where we're seeing a strong desire to shorten supply chains, but also because it really helps with diversification, it really helps with inclusion and sustainability. And that's one of the reasons why we have a very strong push around supporting UK investment into Nigeria, as we saw at the UK Africa Investment Summit at the beginning of the year.
Some of it is quite mundane, slightly selfish, but if you allow me to start with that, it has consistently been a big, huge market for us. It has consistently been a profitable market for us. It has consistently, despite all the weaknesses, I'm not shying away or hiding from some of the weaknesses which have rightly been mentioned. I think I agree. Infrastructure probably comes across as the biggest one. Ease of doing business probably also is quite a relevant one, which would help in quite a remarkable way. But despite all of that, and many other points mentioned, not mentioned, we cannot. And our own example is the scale that the market offers is unrivaled in the world. There are very few countries, literally, you can count them probably on one hand, single digit definitely. The scale, the scale, the depth of the domestic market, the quality of the talent that you're able to get. We use a lot of, all our talent in the country is by and large 99.9% local, but we use a lot of Nigerians across our network globally, as do many other companies, and as do many other businesses across the world. You come across people of Nigerian background, professionals, doctor, engineers, wherever you go. So scale, local talent, opportunity. What do I mean by opportunity? From a developmental evolutionary curve, if you look at Nigeria, we are not comparing A country to B country, but if I look at Nigeria, where it's placed today, the pathway to development is quite a steep one in every sense of the word, in any industry you pick at. We have mentioned and touched upon infrastructure, oil and gas, power, many others is close to unlimited. And that's what we like. That's what we think plays to our strengths. And that's what our job essentially, at a very high level, summarized simplistically, we are connectors of capital, right? So our job is to connect surplus capital into profitable, dynamic opportunities all around the world. That's the job of a global international bank. And we see those opportunities are quite remarkable, quite profitable. And we continue to see demand. We continue to see demand in the thick of the pandemic 2 months ago, when we were in the throes of Aprils and Mays, where a lot of us were locked down. Some of us are still locked down. I'm not, gratefully, thankfully. We continue to see them. And we're working on new deals. And we're having a decent year from a business perspective. So, and that's the dynamism. And I would conclude with this comment with my conviction. I think if we can have a vote or not have a vote, but if you ask me, there's no question in my mind that Nigeria and some of the other emerging market countries, but Nigeria in particular, recovers out of the situation the world is compared to some of the more developed economies, right? Compared to Italy, compared to Greece, compared to Spain.
Thanks, Sarmad.